Now joining us in studio, he's a philanthropist, he's an entrepreneur, he's one of the greatest business leaders in San Diego. I'm so glad to have him in here because every time I meet with him, one of the first things we start talking about is world domination. Ryan Ponsford, good to have you here with the Akili Capital founder. Good to have you, man.
Thanks, Craig. Awesome to be here.
But I'm telling the truth.
Yes.
I mean, world domination, every time you and I get together, it's really about how can we solve world problems, but you actually try and do this. It's pretty fascinating.
I do try, and in some ways, some things are working, and it's one. I think it's a brain thing where some people have a brain that you start thinking about things, and I know your mind's this way. You automatically extrapolate to what's possible, right? Automatically extrapolate what's possible, and how do we get there to amazing and something big, and it gets hard to think small. So that's the way my brain works. So I can't help it.
Yeah, no, and I think it's one of the fascinating things about you, and obviously you've built a lot of successful businesses that way. What I've always got a kick out of how, and now I want our audience to know that you help people financially, right? You help them develop wealth, but you do it through strategies that are more about bringing families together. You've used terms like family continuity. Yeah. But you also have launched some things where you're trying to, I think you'll have to correct me here, but drop a bomb of helping people into markets and studying and what it means to do good for people.
Yes.
So isn't it all kind of centered around doing what's good for others? I mean, is that a fair way to put it?
It is. So we call it the bomb of generosity, right?
Okay.
And so where it started is we kept trying to tackle this issue, as you mentioned, of families, of wealth transition to families, and usually kids blow the money and hate each other, right? Yeah. Bad outcome. And most people care about their families. So how do we solve those issues? And people didn't want to hit it head on and deal with financial literacy and writing mission, vision, purpose statements. So we started using giving as a tool to teach lessons. And we created this philanthropic program somewhat on accident and beta tested it. And it turned out we proved that giving truly is about changing the hearts and minds of those who give. And that became the key, is designing it a way where it really became a way to enhance the impact and joy that people get from giving, oftentimes far more than it does any recipient that receives anything.
So let me pry a little deep here. Give me an example. Give me a success story of what you guys have put your hands on and really kind of extracted that giving quality.
So it started in families, and then we happened to test it with a group of kids, an at-risk youth group within the juvenile court systems. These were middle school kids that had come from real troubled backgrounds. Most of them had been kicked out, expelled from the traditional school system. There were a couple kids that were homeless. We had multiple gangs represented. And we had this idea of what would happen if we raised some money and put them on the giving side of philanthropy, right? What would that do to just change their perspective? For a couple of reasons. One is they've been the beneficiaries of some of these philanthropic programs, and not everybody knows how those things get funded and how they happen. They think wealthy people are the enemy in a lot of ways. A lot of us have this class warfare going on. What if we build some bridges among some of these classes of people and realize that people aren't so bad once you get to know them? And so once we tested it out, a couple things happened. I'd say the real key to it is they started realizing that they could make a difference. So they went through this process of identifying what they would change about the world, what were some causes that we do. We have a cards they go through. And then through that, they went and identified organizations, vetted them. So we took them through a process of doing what we call qualitative and quantitative analysis. So they read tax returns, they interviewed people, and then instead of donating, they made investments. And the outcome of all that was really mind-boggling. I mean, there are a lot of things that happened that I hadn't anticipated. For example, these kids obviously loved reading tax returns. Not obviously, but they did love reading tax returns. I mean, how many people get excited about that? Yeah. These kids walked away excited about that. We jumped in vans, donated money. And the one thing I got out of that we got from these kids is they came back with a new perspective. And if I would have narrowed it into 2 words, it's I can.
Wow.
Right? I can. And they recognize that they can make a difference. And it started with talking about philanthropy is not about money and tax deductions and big checks like everybody thinks. It's not a thing for millionaires. If you break down the word philos, anthropos, philos is love, anthropos, humankind. It's love of humankind. Doesn't say money, doesn't say tax deductions, doesn't say names on buildings. If you dig other people and care about people, you can become a philanthropist.
Wow.
And giving somebody that experience is what changes their hearts and minds.
Wow, what a great message for this show, man. You know what I think is so interesting about it is that's not actually what you do for a living, right?
True.
I mean, it's not what you do for a career in your own financial gain. So these are things that you're doing in a way to positively influence a community, and that's really what this whole show is about. So it's a great message. help us better understand the family continuity and the actual financial wealth building and the advice that you're giving to people that are your clients.
Yeah, so I've been in the financial space for about 20 years, and previous to that was in the private banking world. And I always wanted to figure out, what is it that made these people different? How does somebody get 20, 30, 50, $100 million, right?
Yep.
What are those characteristics? And in asking a lot of questions, I realized from a how do you do it standpoint, there are typically 3 doors that they went through.
Okay.
They built, owned, and monetized companies. A lot of them around here especially did it with real estate, or they had inherited. And I looked around the institution I was in. I was in a large institution where the most qualified bankers working with the most qualified clients at the most qualified institutions.
So you're really in there, and you're not just asking these questions, Ryan Ponsford, but you're actually in the business and seeing these huge accounts.
Yep.
And that's what you're coming to a real determination on. Okay, that's interesting.
So the reality is the wealth creation is different than what most of the financial industry does.
Got
Most
it.
of the financial industry is into managing money other people have made. What we've tried to do is reframe what we do and make it more around what are things we can help and coach and guide people through that helps them actually create wealth through one of those 3 doors.
Ryan, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Craig,
Good having you on.
Appreciate it as always. Always a treat
Yes,
hanging
sir.
out with you.
All right, coming